When I come across a menopausal woman, heck, even an adult woman who has a super healthy, robust sex drive, I'm always a little surprised. And I get excited for that woman because unfortunately, it's rare. Sadly, many of the women I coach struggle with sexual dysfunction. But don't worry, today we are going to explore ways to prevent and reverse it as you age. I was recently listening to an anti-aging conference and I heard Dr. Deb Mathews speak about this topic. I had the pleasure of interviewing her previously on the show about bioidentical hormones, actually quite a few years ago now, which I'll link to that in the show notes. I invited Dr. Mathews back on the show to talk to you wonderful ladies about this critical issue. Dr. Deb Matthew is also known as the Happy Hormones Doctor, which I love that name. She is a best-selling author, international speaker, educator, wife, and mom of 4 boys. After suffering for years with fatigue and irritability due to hormonal imbalance, her quest to resolve her personal health led her to change everything about her practice of medicine. She has been featured on national podcasts, radio, and broadcast shows, including NBC, ABC, CBS, and Fox. So, ladies, let's welcome Dr. Mathews back to the show. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's great to be back.
Great to be back. We were just talking. So you're down in where, Carolina?
I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Yes. And her parents live in the city that I live in, which I think is just such a small world. So we're going to go for coffee one day, right, Deb?
Yes.
It'll be wonderful.
I'll be there soon.
Okay. Okay. So I loved your talk. I was so happy that you did this. There was a lot of people there too. So I just love that you're bringing this education to other healthcare providers because, something you even said in that speech was women aren't really comfortable talking about this very much, right? They're not going to their doctor saying, hey, I've got some problems with my vagina or my problems with my sex life. It's not talked about enough. So I appreciate it, but I would love for you to just kind of tell your story, actually. And I think we talked about it in the first episode, but I really like the story about Suzanne Summers and how you kind of got into all of this.
Sure. Well, I wasn't feeling like myself. I was short-tempered. Like my husband would chew too loud and I would lose my mind. Or my kids would leave the soccer cleats by the front door. And when I tripped over them, like I just wanted to pick the shoe up and throw it against the wall because I was so annoyed. And so my reactions to things were more than what they really needed to be. And I didn't really understand what was happening to me because I knew that my behavior and how I was feeling, I knew it wasn't normal, but I nothing in my medical training helped me understand what was going on.
It's how old were you?
I was in my late 30s at this point. And I was hypothyroid, and I knew that. I was on Synthroid. That's the standard medicine that they give to everybody. And it had taken me, I had symptoms of hypothyroidism for 10 years before I actually finally got diagnosed. It had to get so bad before I kind of finally, my lab went out of the range and I got diagnosed. But then I got put on this medicine and I never felt better. So now it's a whole nother 10 years that I've been on this pill and my lab test looks fine, but I don't feel fine. But now in my late 30s, all of a sudden I was waking up in the middle of the night with panic attacks for no reason. And at least as a doctor, I knew what it was, because otherwise it feels like you're having a heart attack. It feels like you're dying. It's really scary. But I couldn't understand why it was happening. And my husband came across this book written by Suzanne Summers, and it was called The Sexy Years. So I can assure you it was anything but that at our house at that time. And I'm sure that if the book was called The Woman's Big Book About Hormone Issues, he would not have touched that book with a 10-foot pole, but she's smart, so that's not what it was titled. And when he picked up the book, and on the back of the book, it's got those bullet points. And so he could see feeling irritable, tired all the time, not sleeping well. He saw all these things that he recognized in me. And he brought this book home and suggested that maybe I could read it.
Did you want to shove that book where the sun don't shine? Or
he was kind of brave, right? But the reality is that I knew something was wrong and I didn't know what to do about it. And I sure didn't want to get my medical information from a celebrity. And of all people, like what I knew of Suzanne Summers was Chrissy Snow from Three's Company, right?
Exactly.
The dits of all time. And then like the Thigh Master, like this is not where we as doctors go to get our medical information. But I had nowhere else to turn. He's a great guy. He's a great husband. He's super patient, but like he's over it at this point. So I read the book and my whole life changed, because when I read all these stories of women who were feeling just like me and how much better they felt when they got their hormones back in balance, it allowed me to really open my mind. And I realized that there's all these things they didn't teach me at medical school. Another colleague of mine recently said, like, when she learned about this, she felt like they ought to give her a partial refund because they missed some of the really important parts at medical school. But it also had resources to help me learn where to go in order to learn more. So like the A4M is one conference, for example, where practitioners can get all of this education. And, it's not woo-woo. Like this is based in science and research. And it's just that because it's not based in pharmaceutical drugs, it doesn't really trickle down as much through our medical schools and to our doctors. But once I got my hormones back in balance, I got my energy back. My kids got their mom back. My husband got his wife back. I had my life back, but I couldn't go back to just writing prescriptions all day long in my old job because that just didn't feel right anymore. And so I retired. This is now 17 years ago, and retired in my 30s. And I opened my practice. And so now for the last over 16 years, I've been helping men and women get their hormones back in balance so that they can get well, they can get off their prescription drugs and love the way they feel.
Amazing. Amazing. And all from, like how sad is that really, that as a medical doctor, that you got this information, not from med school, but from Suzanne Summers' book.
Yeah.
From Chrissy's book.
I've had a chance to meet her now a couple of times to tell her like how she changed my life. And then because of her, I'm able to touch other people's lives. And I've had a chance to meet Oprah, and Oprah is on bioidentical hormones. And I said, when I met her, like, I'm a doctor that prescribes bioidentical hormones. She did a whole series of shows on hormones back in 2009. My phone rang off the hook, all these women looking for bioidentical hormones. So I told her this story, and she told me that she's still on her hormones. She feels better than she ever does. And she feels so bad for women who are afraid of hormone replacement therapy because they just don't know what they're missing. And then I had a chance to meet Dr. Oz. And what I said to him was like, Suzanne Summers and Oprah, like this is where me and my patients are learning about hormones. Like, why do women have to learn about this from the celebrities instead of from their doctors? And what he said, which is totally true, is that, the pharmaceutical industry has a lot of, not control isn't the right word, a lot of influence over our medical education. And, it's helping women have balanced hormones is nuance. We have to listen. We have to, customize things and personalize things. It's not like this quick, here's a prescription, see you back in a year. And so it doesn't fit with our medical insurance model of, in and out in 10 minutes. And so
absolutely,
that's what Dr. Oz had to say about it.
And I love what you said about what Suzanne said in her book about sexual dysfunction, about the smoothie. Can you please repeat that? Because I love that.
Yeah. So she was saying that, at the end of the day, she'd hop in bed and her husband would look over at her with a hopeful look in his eye. And she would just feel like, oh, I'd rather have a smoothie, like,
which I think so many women are going to be like, yes, like that is me. That's the last thing that I want to do is have sex with my partner, which is so tragic and so upsetting. And we've got clinics and commercials all about just for men and their sexual dysfunction.
Yes. And in fairness, there actually is a medication out now to try to help for women with sexual dysfunction, but it's got some really significant side effects, like frequent side effects, which is nausea and headache.
Like, who wants to have sex when you feel like puking and you have a headache?
Yeah. And then you have to prescribe anti-nausea medicine to help prevent the vomiting,
no,
but at least they're trying, right? Kudos for at least recognizing we got a problem that maybe a solution could be found.
Right. Yeah. I just think there's not too many. I mean, I know that erectile dysfunction is a problem and it's actually becoming a growing problem.
Yeah.
But can safely say there are far more women with sexual dysfunction than men. And not just in perimenopause and menopause.
You're right. And men are very aware. Like if they have a problem with erections or like lots of desire, they are very aware this is not normal, that, you know, they would love to be able to have a solution for that. For women, it's so much more confusing. Like, what's normal, you know?
Yes.
And the answer that we give isn't very satisfying. It's like, well, it depends, you know, everyone's a little different. Like, you and your partner might be happy having intimacy once a month or once a week, whatever. As long as you're happy with it, then it's fine, right? Okay, well, that's fine. But it's not like there's a right answer there. And so many women are confused, like, how interested should I be?
Yes.
Or how much work should it take to have an orgasm? Like, we don't know, right? You only know your own personal experience, kind of like bowel movements. What's it supposed to be like? You only know like you.
Yeah.
So it's confusing. And if you are worried that maybe there's something wrong or there's a problem or you're not normal or whatever, you can try talking to your doctor about it. But, you know, it's not something that doctors have a pill for women, right? For men, we do the little blue pill.
Yeah.
But when we as doctors don't know what to do about something, we don't really like to talk about it. Like, we like to be smart and have all the answers. So first of all, we tend to be down on the things that we're not up on. So that's part of the bioidentical hormone business. They're not so familiar with it. And so they kind of feel like if it was really all that great, they would have taught me at medical school. And since they didn't, therefore it must not be that great. But the same thing is true here. They don't really know what to say. Like, they don't really have a solution. They don't have a way to fix you. They can tell you, well, it's because of your stress, or, you know, this is just part of menopause and it's normal, or it's just your age. But those are all such unsatisfying answers.
They really are. And I have found that most women compare their sex drive to their partner's sex drive if they're with a man. And they think that there's something wrong with them because they don't want to have sex every day and their partner does. And they go through their entire marriage thinking like this, like that there's something wrong with them because they can't keep up with their partner and they feel bad. And it's like, why don't I want to have sex all the time?
It really causes problems in relationships sometimes because, and it can go either way. I mean, men can get low testosterone and other medical problems or be on medicines and they lose the desire too. So it could go either way. But if one partner has more desire than the other partner, sometimes the less desired partner takes it personally, right? Like, so if a woman kind of loses interest because, like, really, like, sometimes it just, like, the thought doesn't even pop into our mind. Like, we just don't even think about it. We don't even care about it anymore sometimes.
It's a chore.
And the other partner sometimes feels that it's them, right? Like, they don't understand. They feel like you're not interested in me. It's me. You're not attracted to me anymore. It hurts their self-esteem. And if their self-esteem is suffering, you know, that just starts conflicts happening. And this affects families, right? I mean, if the spouses aren't getting along, that affects the children. I mean, it's, you know, it's a problem. And a lot of times we don't think of, like, our sexual health as an important problem, but the World Health Organization actually has sort of officially declared that women's sexuality it's a human right for us to have the opportunity to, you know, express ourselves and have, you know, these kinds of intimate relationships. And we know that when things aren't working, that it is something that impacts our health on different levels. Right. And it's something that we should be able to talk about so that for people who are bothered by it, worried about it, upset by it, I mean, if it's a problem for you, then let's talk about things that we can do to make it better.
Absolutely. Let's talk about this, because it's a bit of a spectrum, you know, there's physical things that are happening, but also, you know, you talk about what's going on in the brain and how that can influence our sexual function. So give us the symptoms, like the range of what can happen.
So if it's okay, can we go kind of sort of by age?
Yes.
Let's start with, like, you're in your 20s. And one of the there's two really common causes of just loss of interest, like, you know, not becoming aroused, like just sexual functions not quite right. One of those is birth control pills, because when women go on birth control pills, one of the things that the pills do is they increase a binding protein in our bloodstream that lessens testosterone. And the messages from our brain to get our ovaries to make more testosterone get lessened. So testosterone actually goes down when you're on birth control pills. Now, we use birth control pills on purpose for that reason in women who have acne, because for some women, they have too much testosterone. If we give them the birth control pills, that can lessen their testosterone, that can help their acne get better. But for the rest of women, if they just started off with just a normal amount of testosterone, now it goes too low, well, their sex drive can go out the window. Another really common one is certain antidepressant medications. Specifically, they're called SSRIs. So there's Prozac and Zoloft and Celexa. There's all different ones. But in men who have premature ejaculation, we give them on purpose these medicines to lessen their sexual arousal in order to prevent premature ejaculation. But when we're putting women on birth control pills or giving them an antidepressant medication, I'm pretty confident that these are not really discussed, because at least if you knew, you could know, okay, well, here's where I am now. And now, a couple months from now, I can kind of take stock and see if something has changed, so that if it's different, at least I know what I can do to go back and change it. And listen, if you are horribly depressed, if you are in the pits of despair, like, an antidepressant may be more important than your sex drive. Like, I'm not, and I don't want young women to get pregnant before they're ready. I mean,
yes,
but it's important to know this.
Yes. I was when I had my hormonal disaster that happened to me, my doctor put me on, I want to call it Cipralex. I think it was called Cipralex.
Okay.
It's an antidepressant. She wanted me to take it the second half of my cycle for my PMS. And so I got on it, and lo and behold, I couldn't orgasm anymore. Like it went flat. Like nothing was there. So I went off of it. I was like, nope, not for me. Sorry. Because it was just, I had to get to the root of the problem anyways. But yes, 100% it affected my sex drive, as did the birth control pill at a very young age. It really messed with my hormones.
And if you don't know, then you wonder, well, am I really attracted to my partner? Like, is there something wrong with me? Like, and especially when you're young and this is happening, like, you don't have a lot of, to go on. And so it can be confusing. But so then maybe doesn't have to be in your 30s, but I'm going to lump this one in your 30s, because this is when it happened to me, is hypothyroidism. Yeah. If your thyroid isn't working, libido goes down, like desire for sex, arousal, all those kinds of things just go down. But that's, if you go in and complain, I don't know, maybe something's wrong with me. I'm not sure if like my libido is okay. I promise your doctor's not immediately going to say, aha, we got to check your thyroid. And we want it to be optimal, not just normal. And, we want to do like the full panel, not just the screening test. But low libido is something that I see very commonly in women who have hypothyroidism, low thyroid function. And if we can get your thyroid doing what it needs to do, then it can come back again.
Yeah, I would say that probably happened to me too. Same thing in my 30s, undiagnosed hypothyroidism.
Yeah. And so there you are. Hypothyroidism it affects your mood and your energy. And so when you go in and you complain, like, I'm not motivated to do anything, I'm tired all the time, I'm sleeping all the time. Well, then you get your antidepressant with your hypothyroidism, and then you're on birth control pills because of, you're still in your childbearing years. So now you've got 3 things going on that are killing your sex drive.
Yes. Okay. So we've got the 20s, the 30s. Now what's going on in our 40s?
So in the 40s, there's actually a couple of different things that are happening. One is your progesterone level is going down. Progesterone is the progestational hormone. It's one of the ones that go up and down over your menstrual cycle. But as we get into our 40s and our fertility is starting to kind of go downhill a little bit, we just don't make as much progesterone anymore. And that typically affects us right before our period. So that's when they had you take that antidepressant, right? It's the weeks before your period. And so in those weeks, we tend to be more irritable or anxious, or we want to eat everything in the whole fridge, and we sure don't feel like going to the gym, and your husband chews too loud, you want to punch him, and we just don't feel our best. And so a lot of times libido kind of goes out the window. Generally, our best time for our sex drive is when we're ovulating in mid-cycle, around day 14 of our menstrual cycle. But things often get worse leading into your period. And this becomes very common when we're in our 40s. The other one, though, that's really big for libido is testosterone. So we think of testosterone as the male hormone, but we women have testosterone too. In fact, we have 10 times more testosterone than estrogen, which is kind of mind-blowing.
It is.
It's just that men have 10 times more testosterone than women do. But testosterone is really important for everything to do with sex, like the idea popping into your head in the first place, any kind of arousal or desire and vaginal lubrication and having an orgasm, like all of that just kind of goes down if you don't have testosterone. And of course, testosterone is not the whole picture, right? Like you still might be on your antidepressant or your birth control pills, or, your thyroid's not optimal or whatever, but testosterone is really important. And testosterone is not just important for sex. Testosterone is our motivation, our confidence, our get up and go, our self-esteem, our competitive drive, our decisiveness. So if testosterone goes down, a lot of times we just feel blah, flat.
Yeah.
Like we make our way through our day. Everything sort of feels forced. We do what we have to do. If something must happen today, you'll make it happen, right? You got to get food on the table and, you'll brush your teeth. But if it doesn't really have to happen today, you kind of don't really feel like it. You just kind of push it off to the side and kind of procrastinate on things. And so when you think about, and oftentimes you're tired. So then by the time, your spouse looks at you with that twinkle in his eye, you kind of feel like, oh, just another thing I don't feel like doing today.
Yeah. And now what about estrogen?
Okay. So for most women, estrogen drops sometime, around about 50, which is kind of, the general age when we are going through menopause. So perimenopause is the lead up, happens over years, kind of like puberty in reverse. Once you haven't had a period for 12 months, that's called menopause. But, estrogen is fluctuating over this time frame. But by the time we're in our 50s, for a lot of us, our estrogen level has dropped. Estrogen is an antidepressant, so it gives us energy and perks up our mood, keeps our brain sharp so we can remember why we walked in the room. But it's also really important for keeping moisture in our body. So when estrogen drops, we tend to get dry. We get dry eyes and dry mouth and dry skin and dry hair and a dry vagina. Our vagina is supposed to be kind of plump and juicy. But once we lose our estrogen, it gets thin, it gets dry, it's not very stretchy anymore. It can kind of tear. We can get like little irritations from intercourse. And so now it's not just that you're not interested. Now it can actually hurt. Mm-hmm. So when women come in and they're menopausal, I literally have women come and sit down and say, I just don't really feel like a woman anymore. Like I don't feel feminine. I kind of feel like an it. Aww. And like that's sort of a hard thing to put into words, but they just know that something doesn't feel right. And then sex hurts. Like one lady described it, it felt like somebody's shoving a cactus inside her. It's painful. So of course you're not really going to be too interested in it if it's a really unpleasant experience. And sex shouldn't be painful. So because so many women are unfortunately and unnecessarily frightened of estrogen, they feel like they're making the best decision for themselves and they're doing the best thing if they stay far away from hormone replacement therapy. But then, their doctor gives them some kind of like a lubricant cream or even some kind of a little dab of estrogen cream to try to help. And a lot of times, sometimes it can help, but a lot of times it's just not enough.
Is that because it's good to have the estrogen right on the labia or inside the vagina for the dryness. But have you seen in your practice that it's really important to also get systemic levels of estrogen up in order to help with sexual function?
Yeah, because for women especially, a whole lot of what goes on surrounding sex happens between our ears. And so of course, we don't want it to hurt. We want the tissues there to be normal. But yeah, if estrogen, all of these hormones impact who we are on the inside, how we react to the world around us, how we relate to other people. And so our sexual desire is all tied up in all of that. And so definitely we would want to make sure that there's enough estrogen getting to all those tissues. But if we can get your whole body healthy and well, if you're exhausted, let me talk about one more.
Yes.
This could be at any age, and that's cortisol, which is your stress hormone. When we are stressed out, who's not stressed out these days? When we're stressed out, cortisol goes up to help us cope with stress. That's great in the short term. But when we're chronically stressed day in and day out, cortisol gets out of whack. Sometimes it's too high, sometimes it's too low, sometimes it's too high at the wrong time of the day and too low at the other time of the day. If it gets out of whack, it's very difficult to cope with stress. We get tired. We can be tired but wired at the same time. Like you're tired all day, then you're lying awake at night staring at the ceiling and you can't sleep. Little things feel overwhelming, like just getting the groceries home from the grocery store and putting them away is like just exhausting, and it feels overwhelming when it doesn't need to. So if cortisol is supposed to help you cope with stress and your cortisol is now out of whack, in your body's infinite wisdom, it sort of knows like this is not the right time to procreate and bring another baby in the world when you're, all stressed out. And so it just really shuts down our desire. It shuts down the other hormones. It lowers testosterone. It gets in the way with how our thyroid hormones work. So stress is another really important cause of low libido for all of us. And, I think a lot of women probably have had the experience that if their spouse takes them to a Caribbean island and they are, sipping fruity drinks in a pineapple and, laying under the palm trees besides a aqua blue water, their sex life is better while they're on vacation. So if I could write a prescription for a tropical island vacation, that would probably help a lot of women with their sexual dysfunction. But of course, most insurance companies won't cover that.
Yeah. I can definitely say for myself that I always know if my stress is too much and it's out of control, because it's honestly like I don't even have a vagina. Like all the energy's in my brain and going into my brain and thinking about way too many things. And it's like, don't touch me, don't come near me. I don't even want to have a vagina right now.
Yeah, right. Like you just imagine, right? Like you've just made it through the day. Thank God you've made it through the day. It is now bedtime. You get in that bed, your head hits the pillow, and now somebody wants you to be energetic. Like, are you kidding me?
No, they want to touch you. You're like, do you want a punch in the face? Because that's what's going to happen. I actually have made a point with my partner, with my husband, almost through our entire marriage. We're going on over 10 years now. We don't have sex at nighttime. And it's like, I'm like, who wants to have sex at nighttime? We were raising two little children, right? Like at the end of the day, that's the last thing that's on my mind. So we just made it like we have our sex daytime, put in the calendar pretty much. It's like, okay, this day and this, and it's going to happen in the morning, and it's so much better.
Well, good for you.
So, everybody hear that though, because I think we get into these like, headspaces of, and I mean, I know it can be hard when you have children and, if you're not home by yourself and all that, but if you can, sometimes like some women just need that like suggestion, and they're like, oh, I've had many people be like, oh, I never even thought that, to have a daytime sex. Like, yes, it's so much better. At least it is for me.
And even just the idea that you've made a plan, you've decided, you've carved out the time. This is the priority in that moment. That's what you're going to do. Because otherwise, it's like you've just done everything else on your list of things to do. It's like just another, like you said before, right? It's just another chore, another list on the thing, whereas, if you go out for date night, that's really good for your relationship. So you can just carve out your date time in your own home.
Yes. And I think that is a good idea. Like some people think like, oh, that's really like taking the romance out of it or the spontaneity. And I'm like, no, you've been married for 10 years. You can put it in your scheduler, or at least you have a specific time and day. And because then you're right. You just block out that time rather than because we always have a million things to do that
Yeah.
are in
You
our
just need to
eyes
think
more
about-
important.
You got to think, what are you going to call it in your scheduler?
Date day.
Yeah, date day. That's a good thing.
Date day. Date morning. How about that?
Yeah.
So yeah, I've had women, Deb, that have come to me that have said, I had this one woman recently who said, the last time I had sex was 2 years ago. It hurt so bad, it tore. It tore the inside of my vagina, and I could not do that I couldn't have sex again. And she had come from having a really healthy sex life. Her and her husband had been very intimate. They had a healthy sex life together. So for them to suddenly have it be this, really painful experience, she was devastated, which, like, of course, right? And there's so many women that, it's just devastating, because this is, with their partner. And like you said, if that was a big part of your relationship and suddenly that's not happening anymore, that's a huge strain to the marriage. It just is.
For women, right? So much of our self-worth, we end up tying to our appearance and, our weight. And so if we aren't, if we're not looking attractive for our partner, then we worry about it. Or, if this is a part of the relationship that we feel like we're not really satisfying them, then, it's just all these things are tied up in our self-esteem. And the good news is there are a lot of things that we can be doing in order to make things better for you.
Yes. So let's talk about those things. So first, HRT, because that's why this happens for a lot of women,
right?
Especially as we're going into perimenopause and menopause.
Yes.
If, suddenly you have a drop in sex drive, you can definitely start with looking at your hormones. And as Dr. Mathews was just saying, it's not just testosterone. I think most women think it's all testosterone. And I remember hearing a doctor saying that, testosterone, like you said, it's that, like, it gives you the oomph to go out and get the sex. But estrogen, he said, is the hormone that makes you actually want to do the active sex. And I thought, that's brilliant. And I've definitely found in my practice that there's a lot of women, I would say 50%, it's the estrogen that brings the sex drive back. What about you?
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point. We're complicated.
Yes.
And there's lots of things that are going on. And if we oversimplify things down to, well, all you need is a prescription of testosterone and it's going to fix everything, then it doesn't always work, first of all. Or sometimes in an effort to help more and more, we give you a big old dose and then you end up getting side effects. So we don't want to try to oversimplify it too much, because we want to go through the list. Are you on birth control pills? Are you on antidepressants? Are you really stressed? What's going on with your cortisol? Like, those are all things that can be addressed. If your testosterone, though, really is low, sometimes there's things we can naturally do to get it to boost. If we get your cortisol normalized, that can boost it. There's DHEA is a hormone that is made in our adrenal glands that our body can use to make more testosterone. And so sometimes when we're stressed, our DHEA level goes down. And as we age, it goes down. For some women, we can give them some DHEA and then their body can naturally make a little bit more testosterone, and that can help them. So there's lots of things we can do even without hormone replacement therapy. But for women who are low in testosterone, we can give them back some natural testosterone, and it just helps us have stronger muscles and bones, so less risk of osteoporosis and frailty as we get older. It gives us more energy, motivation. In fact, just recently, I saw a patient who's a serial entrepreneur. Like, she's always opening new companies, and she thrives on juggling a million things all at the same time. She's always done that. And now that she's in her mid-40s, she's dropping the balls, and it's very much bothering her because she doesn't feel right. And when we got her back, and her testosterone level had dropped quite low, and she'd lost that drive, and when we got her testosterone back restored, she's back to juggling the balls and doing all the things that she used to do, because it affects how we feel. So it's more than just for sex, and it's more than just testosterone. The one that women fear the most is usually estrogen replacement. And this is really unfortunate. And it's because us medical doctors told you, everybody else, that estrogen caused breast cancer. And as it turns out, estrogen does not cause breast cancer. I'm going to say that again. Estrogen does not cause breast cancer. For women who get breast cancer and it's estrogen receptor positive, it doesn't mean it was caused by estrogen. It just means that estrogen can feed their cancer. So estrogen doesn't cause breast cancer. The thing that did cause breast cancer was a drug form of progesterone, which is one of our hormones. It was a synthetic man-made chemical that we were using. We didn't know, but it was increasing the risk for breast cancer by a little tiny bit.
Yeah.
But nonetheless,
progestin, which is what's in birth control pills.
Yes, which is what is in birth control pills. There's many different progestins.
Yeah.
Probably some do the breast cancer risk more than others, but we don't have it all sorted out which is which. So if we put you on hormone replacement therapy with the natural form of progesterone, not the synthetic kind, it does not increase the risk for breast cancer. So we are able to give women hormone replacement therapy if they choose to have it in a way that should not increase your risk for getting breast cancer, in a way that can help make your bones stronger and keep you feeling your best, make it so that sex isn't painful, help you have some desire.
Less
so
depression, sleeping better, all these things that can contribute to that sex drive.
Yeah. So it's just not necessary to suffer.
No. And then, so also check your thyroid, ladies, because that's also goes down a lot of the time in menopause. That's definitely something.
Thyroid problems are very common in women.
Very, very common. It's like I feel like way more have that very end, the very bottom of the range. That's what I see constantly. So no doctor would look at that. Well, typical medical doctor is going to say, oh, you need thyroid. It's like, oh, your thyroid's great.
Right.
It's like 0.1 away from being flagged.
Right. So even though, like for me, right, your thyroid is enlarged, you have every single symptom of low thyroid, but until that number gets so bad that it's outside of the range, that's when you've suddenly got the thyroid problem.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, it's so frustrating. What about the women that are over the age of 60 that have, because they came from a time when it was really like, do not do hormones, it's going to kill you. And they're in their 60s now and they're being told they can't start HRT, or a woman that gets to her 60s on hormone replacement therapy and is being told that she shouldn't continue taking them.
Okay. These are so important because there's so much doctors are taught. It's so ingrained in their psyche. So what doctors are taught is that women should go off hormones as soon as possible because they're still thinking that we're giving the women the one that increases their risk for breast cancer. The North American Menopause Society has put out a statement to all the doctors to say, there's no medical studies that say that anything bad happens if women keep going on their hormones. So this idea that you should stop it, that's not actually based on any science or research or data. I don't know who made it up. But what the statement says is if a woman is getting benefit from the hormones, for example, if she has osteoporosis or osteopenia, hormones are good for her bones, or if she's got the vaginal dryness or the painful sex, or she's still having hot flashes without the hormones, if she's still getting a benefit from the hormones, it's okay to continue the hormones no matter how many birthdays you've had. But the regular doctors have not got that memo, and so they're still trying to get people off the hormones. The other thing is what we saw in the original study that scared women about breast cancer is that when we gave women that synthetic progestin pill, hormones are supposed to be good for your heart, but women were having more heart problems. And it was because of that synthetic progestin pill. It's because we weren't giving them the bioidentical form of estrogen that's natural to our bodies. So there were other things going on. But what we now know, having looked at this for many years, is that when we gave women the synthetic pill, that there was a slight increase in the risk for heart problems within the first year of starting hormones if they started the hormones when they were older. So if you start on hormone therapy when you're, in your 50s, like right around the time that you're going into menopause, we saw a protective benefit on your heart. If you waited and you were more than 10 years since you had your last period, and then you started on hormone therapy, we saw an increase in the risk for heart problems. within the first 1 year of starting on those synthetic hormones. If you made it past the first year and you didn't have a heart problem, then your risk for heart disease went down and down and down and down as you went forward. But all that doctors know now is you got to start on the hormones within the first few years. Otherwise, you've missed the window. You can't have hormones because it's bad for your heart. So it's misinformation. What I do for women, if they come in and they're over 60 and they've got symptoms and they want to be on hormone therapy, maybe they've learned more about it and, now they feel like this is something they'd like to try, is I will still give them hormone therapy. I mean, we talk about it. We say all these things and help them understand why their other doctor might be telling them something different. And, we talk about all risks and benefits and side effects and, give full informed consent. And if they would like to go ahead with it, I typically like to do it in a cream applied to the labia because, first of all, that's going right where most of the time they need it, to help there. And it doesn't, when we take estrogen as a pill, it can increase, in some women, it may increase the risk for blood clots. It depends whether it's the natural form of hormone or the synthetic form of hormone. There's also controversy around that. But most medical doctors believe that if we give women vaginal hormones, that it only works on your vagina. And depending on what dose we give you, we can get hormones to work in lots of parts of your body. But when we give it to you in the vagina, or at least the outer part of the vagina, most of the other doctors don't get as bent out of shape. So women can get the hormones, they can feel better. Their other doctor doesn't give them a hard time about it. And so it's sort of a way that we can help you feel better, without you kind of getting yourself caught between two doctors that have different opinions, which is always so hard.
Yes. But would you say that it is okay to start at any age?
In my medical opinion, as long as you understand, right, all the stuff that I just said, it is okay to start at any age, especially if you're going to use the hormones topically, because what we worry about as you get older and older is the risk for blood clots, the risk for strokes, because birth control pills increase your risk for blood clots and strokes. It's just that if you're 19, your risk already started so low that even when it's increased, it's still infinite. When you're 70, you really could have a heart attack or a stroke. And so, we just don't want to be doing anything that would increase your risk. So with the synthetic pills, there was an increase in the risk. So even though we're not using the synthetic pills, that's why the other doctors are still scared.
Right. So topically through the skin or the labia can be, there hasn't been anything that showed that increased your risk of heart attack and stroke.
That's right. And even the bioidentical version of estrogen does not increase the risk for heart attacks and strokes and blood clots and things the way that the horse estrogens did. It's just not the same thing. Mm-hmm. But nonetheless, it's something that the doctors are still very worried about. And even if your doctor has read the research and they're like me, they believe it's okay. If they were to give you hormone replacement therapy and then you did have a heart attack or a stroke because you're 70, regardless of hormone replacement therapy or not, they will be blamed and their license is on the line.
Right. Yes. Yeah. But all the research does show that if you take the estrogen topically throughout your 50s, that it helps, reduces risk of heart attack and stroke. Yeah. So I just want everybody to just be very clear about that.
If you don't start on your estrogen until you're 67, it can't go backwards and erase what happened over the last, 10 or 15 years since you went through menopause, but it still has positive benefits going forward on your bones, on your skin, on your mood, on your, intimacy, etc.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Okay. That's great because you get a lot of women that are like, oh, I would like to do this. Like I've been suffering for 20 years.
Can I tell you a really quick story? Yes. I had a man came in to see me. He had some issues with testosterone and sexual function. And so we got him spiffed up and he was doing great. The problem is his wife couldn't tolerate intercourse because it was painful. So, we got him all great, but He's all dressed up, nowhere to go. So he convinced his wife to come in, and she was a little hesitant. She didn't want hormones. She had heard all about how they're dangerous, but she came in and we just kind of talked to her and gave her just a little bit. We didn't go like full on, but I had a telehealth appointment with her a couple months later. And so she's, in her kitchen on her computer, and we're talking, and she's feeling better, and, she's whatever. So her husband came around behind her, and like behind her shoulder, he's like this.
Thumbs up.
And
it's working.
He was giggling like a second grader, but you know what? They were enjoying themselves and they were having fun, and they couldn't do that before.
Oh, that's great. That's a great story. Yeah. I've heard too, Dr. Lindsay Berkson talking about, if you haven't been on hormone replacement therapy for over 10 years and you're in your 60s or 70s, that you can start very low and slow to basically kind of give those hormone receptors a time to kind of upregulate, because I always say it's like they're going to sleep because they're not being used.
Yes.
And so, you can go very small and just kind of ease your way into it. And that's a possible way that you could talk to your doctor about possibly trying that. So just an option out there. Okay. So there's the hormones. Great. And, you can, testosterone in the vagina can be great. Estrogen inside the vagina can be great. There's there's one called an E string, which is this little circular rubber, what would you call it? I
don't know. It looks like a bracelet.
Yeah. That you insert into your cervix, and it releases a little bit of estradiol. If you have a very dry vagina, that can be uncomfortable. So cream might be better for you. You can always they can give you applicators to put that inside. You can do suppositories. So there's lots of options out there, you guys, lots of options. And it can also help with your preventing urinary tract infections, which is great. Yeah. And just bladder control.
Yeah. And one thing that I would say is there are lots of things out there. So if you try one thing and it doesn't really work for you, maybe it's irritating or makes you itch or whatever, don't give up. Then you go back to your doctor and let them know this isn't working for me, and they can try something different.
Yeah. Because sometimes I've done the suppositories, and this can be a little bit leaky and messy and uncomfortable for some women. They don't mind it. Cream can be better. So there's, lots of options. So, find what's going to work for you.
Yeah.
Because there's lots to choose from. Let's talk about nitric oxide.
Oh, sure. Okay. So as men get older and they start to have problems with erections, the reason is that they're not getting enough blood flow to the penis, because little blood vessels get clogged with plaque. Just like our heart, arteries can get clogged with plaque. The blood vessels to the penis are teeny weeny. They get clogged easily. Men get erectile dysfunction. So there's all sorts of research going on to help the men. But if you think about it, for women, similar things are happening. We've got blood vessels, really the clitoris is kind of the same thing as like a penis, just it's mostly inside a woman. But in any case, all the things that can help men can help women too. So nitric oxide is something that is naturally found in certain foods, like especially beets are very rich in nitric oxide. You can take it as a nutritional supplement, and what it does is it opens up blood vessels. So that's how Viagra and Cialis, that's how they work, is they open up blood vessels. So nitric oxide is kind of a natural way to open up blood vessels, and it doesn't just improve blood flow to our private parts, it improves blood flow to our brain and our heart and lots of other places, your fingertips, if you got bad circulation in your hands. But nitric oxide is a supplement that's kind of like nature's version of a natural Viagra that can work for women just like it can work for men.
Perfect. Scream Cream. I don't like that name, but yeah.
Their compounding pharmacies are special pharmacies that personalize prescriptions just for you. And they can actually make up a cream that then you can apply to the clitoral area. And there can be different combos of things, but some of it has a cream that's got a mintiness to it, that like when you put the cream on if your muscles are sore, what's that called?
Camphor.
Freeze. So
yeah.
along those lines, just to kind of make things tingle and wake up. And they can put some of the medicines in it that open up our blood vessels. Arginine is something that's an amino acid. It's one of the building blocks of protein, but it can open up blood vessels. So they can make this little combo cream. You can apply it topically, and it helps for some women. I've had some women that found it didn't really do much for them, but it's an option. If you march into your regular doctor's office and ask for it, though, it's probably they won't know what to do.
Could I get some scream cream?
Yeah, they can't just call it into, your corner pharmacy, because it only comes from a compounding pharmacy where they make up the prescription, and the doctor has to say like what the recipe is that they want. And if they never heard of it before, then they won't know how to do it.
Okay. Oxytocin. Now, this is a hormone, and I just never see it being used very often, but it's the lovey-dovey hormone. So have you seen that help?
For some women, it can help. So when we hug, when women breastfeed, it releases oxytocin, which is our bonding hormone. And hugs need to be at least 20 seconds long. So usually when we see somebody, we give them a quick hug and we go, like, that's not even long enough. But it helps us feel more connected to other people and want to be more intimate. And for some people, there's a whole variety of reasons why our oxytocin level may not really be where it needs to be. And it just can help us to be more interested in intimacy, to be more responsive, have better orgasms. And again, you can't walk into your regular doctor's office and say that you want to try it, because they can't just call in a prescription easily, into the corner pharmacy. They know about this in terms of pregnancies, because it's one of the things that they put in the IV to help a woman along when she's having, when she's in labor. So if you were to walk into your doctor and say, hey, can I try some oxytocin? They would think, what the heck are you talking about? Because it's not something that's routinely available by a prescription. It is available from compounding pharmacies, but it's just not something that the routine doctors know about to use in a sense.
It's usually used in a nasal spray. Is that right?
It can be used in a nasal spray. It can be used as an injection. There's different ways, but it's not just, typically we don't just give it as a pill.
Okay. Do you use it much?
You know what? We went through a phase where we tried it in the practice. We didn't have a lot of people coming back to ask for more, which we sort of interpreted as, whatever it is that we are doing with it, maybe it's not really doing enough that it makes a difference, which doesn't mean that it's the oxytocin's fault. It could be how we were prescribing it wasn't really optimal too.
Right. I remember hearing Dr. Thierry Hertog, talk about it and how he suddenly just so liked his wife again.
Yeah. And
lovey-dovey.
Dr. Annika Becca uses it a lot too. But see, the other thing may be that it's hard. We don't have easy tests. Like we can't just easily test your oxytocin level. So if your oxytocin level is fine and we give you more, maybe it doesn't do anything. Whereas if your oxytocin level was low and now we restore it, that person might have a really important impact.
Yeah, I was interviewing a woman, Nat Needham, about peptides, and she was saying that oxytocin shots, she said, this is the power of peptides. She's like, you can take oxytocin and give yourself this minuscule little amount, and in 30 minutes, you're going to be running to the bathroom with diarrhea. I was like, oh, that's a side effect of oxytocin? Diarrhea?
That's not so good for your sex drive if
right?
You're like running to the bathroom.
Hold on. No, not at all. Okay, so I think we've covered most things here. Where can people find you? And I know you've got a great book that you give out. So let's talk about that.
Sure. Okay. So my practice, Signature Wellness, is in Charlotte, North Carolina. While we do some telehealth, I am only licensed in North Carolina, so we can work with people here, or you would have to come here for your initial appointment in order to establish care. And then we can do telehealth after that. I wrote a book because I found that a lot of women would come in and what they were saying is like, I don't feel right. This doesn't feel normal. I just want to feel like myself again. I'm not sure if this could be from my hormones. Like, I'm not really sure. And so I wrote this book to help women figure out how they're feeling be because of their hormones. So it's called This Is Not Normal, A Busy Woman's Guide to Symptoms of Hormone Imbalance. And it has a whole bunch of quizzes, like checklists, low testosterone, check down the list, high cortisol, whatever it is. So you can start to figure it out. It's got some tips for helping yourself to start feeling better. And then really importantly, it has some resources for where you can find doctors who can help you. So there's
just great.
we are out there, but sometimes we're the best kept secret in town.
Yes, 100%. I've had you on my list of doctors for many years since we did our last interview. So you are on my list of doctors to see. So, because I think you're fabulous. And I can't wait to go for coffee with you. It'll be great. Yes, to find a nice, like-minded person that we could just sit there and talk about hormones. Because nobody around me wants to hear about us. Well, thank you very much for coming back on the show and bringing light to this topic that is not being talked about enough. And so I hope that all of you listeners have been taking notes and you're going to take charge of your sexual health, because there is so much that you can do for it. So do not settle for suffering. Right, Deb?
Amen.
Amen. All right. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.